Hi everyone and welcome to this new video. Now, on the 1st of March 2025, I took the BSCP exam. I failed the first attempt, but I managed to succeed the second attempt. So, essentially, I got the Bursuit Certified Practitioner certification. It was issued the 1st of March 2025. So, I want to make a small series over BSCP, similar to how I did for OSCP. So this is gonna be a BSCP technical guide for all of you who want to know more about BSCP. Now, I've already written a blog post about it, so about the certification, about my experience and all things of the sort, and this blog post is already available. So if you're interested, just read about it. Essentially, the structure of the blog post, you can see it here on the left. We talk about the prerequisites, we talk about the Web Security Academy by Portswigger, the different phases for the preparation, and then we talk about the BSCP exam itself with the different steps. Because basically you have two vulnerable applications. Each vulnerable application you need to find 3 vulnerabilities. So in this series we will analyze all of this content and I will bring more technical stuff as well. In this video, however, to start off the series, I want to read the final section of the blog post in which I talk about my experience with the exam. So here I'm just scrolling through the blog post. Here I talk about a bunch of different things. Here I give an order over which, in my opinion, you can approach the learning. However, of course, this is like there's no strict order. You can do as you wish. Here I talk about how I take notes during the practice, like a lot of things. And at the end of the blog post, we see this section on my experience with the exam attempt. So in this video, I'm just gonna read it out loud and I'm gonna add some more thoughts as they come in. As always, I hope this video is useful and you get some value out of it. If you do, subscribe to the channel, share this video and this channel with like-minded people. Thank you very much and enjoy the video. So let's start discussing my experience with BSCP. Now to finish off, I want to detail my personal experience with the exam, hoping it will be useful. I had 2 exam attempts and this is a very important thing to mention. The first attempt I failed, and I would say I failed pretty hard, because in the exam you have to find 6 vulnerabilities over 2 applications. So each application has 3 specific vulnerabilities, and I only discovered 2 out of 6 vulnerabilities. And specifically, I discovered the first 2 vulnerabilities for the first application. So in app 1, I went to the second step. I went up until the third step, essentially. But I could not solve the third, and in the second application, I could not even find the first. So it was very disappointing. Now, in the second attempt instead, I discovered all 6 vulnerabilities in the first 55 minutes. So it was a very different experience. So here begs the question. Now I had 2 attempts and like they were one after the other. So I had the first one and then right after I had the second one in the same day. I barely even rested, like not even 5 minutes. So I want to discuss this point because I think it's important. Why was my performance so different between the first and second attempt? And of course, I cannot really say for certain. I don't have this certainty, so I cannot give it to you. However, what I do know is that the exam started pretty well. I was confident in my understanding, and indeed, I did discover and exploit the first vulnerability pretty fast, in around 10 minutes. And this is the time that I had set for myself. I was like, okay, you need between 10, 15, maybe 20, at most 30 minutes to find and successfully exploit the first vulnerability. Any more than that, you're gonna lag behind. You're gonna have some time debt. However, the problem came in the second step, because I hit a very small block for the first privilege escalation. And to be honest, when I look at the vulnerability, I actually was on the right path, but then I confused myself. And this is where things started to go downhill, because I started to feel a bit of anxiety. And instead of being cold, following the checklist that I prepared, I let anxiety took control over me. I was still able to be functional, so I was still able to test. However, I was much slower, and I would say I was also way less reactive. Like, I did not really understand what was going on. I was confused. I forgot basic things that I would normally know. I lost time, and more importantly, for a moment, I lost faith in my ability to discover the vulnerability. And this is one of the most basic things that you need to have. You need to understand that you are prepared and you need to have faith in yourself, essentially. Now, when I did discover the second vulnerability for the first application, at that point, I felt like I already lost the exam because I was not focused anymore. I was in too much rush. I could not really focus and I could not really approach the test in a methodical way, which is actually what you need to do. You need to be extremely methodical, extremely cold-blooded. And this made me miss all the other vulnerabilities. Now, morale is hard to manage in general, however, it is especially hard to manage when you have an exam with limited time. And when I was thinking about it during the writing of this blog post, I really feel like the 4-hour window of time really fucked me up, because essentially it made me wanna rush things. Now, even in OSCP, you only have 24 hours to do the exam itself, and then 24 hours to do the reporting, right? But when you have 24 hours for testing, you know essentially that you do have enough time. And I remember my experience with OSCP. It was fun. It was like, okay, I make a little bit progress and then I take notes and then I report everything. It was way more methodical because I knew that I could be slow. Like, slow and steady for OSCP is very good as long as you keep making progress, right? And when I was doing OSCP, I knew that I had enough time. I took things very slowly in a very methodical way. I was following my cheat sheet. I was following my mental checklist. I was taking note of every test I made. I was taking note of every progress because I was also thinking about the future report. So that was my experience with OSCP. Now, with BSCP, the window of time really does matter. I mean, you really have to rush things because in 4 hours, it's true that in the second attempt, I managed to solve it in only 55 minutes, so not even an hour. This means that technically you do have the time. However, it is really hard to manage from like a psychological point of view. So this time I felt like I had to go fast, which made me more emotional than normal, because I was like, you are on a clock. If you miss the vulnerability for like 30 minutes, you are losing a lot of time. In OSCP, you have a much bigger window of time and you can fail, like, it's sort of like you are allowed to fail a bit more. I knew that the time itself is enough, and the fact that I solved it at the second exam in not even an hour goes to show that it really is enough. I mean, the vulnerabilities, they are not too complex. However, to find them and to exploit them, it does require some time. And from a psychological point of view, the limited window of time really does put a lot of pressure in the performance itself. So be careful of this, be mindful of this. And of course, I'm not saying this to scare you off. As I said, you can totally do it in the time that is given, like technically speaking, especially if you're fast. However, you sort of like have to get used to this working very fast. So basically that's the idea. Now, after the first attempt, 4 hours had passed. And I was pretty disappointed, of course. I only discovered 2 out of 6 vulnerabilities. And this, for a very brief moment, made me sort of like doubt if I was ready for the exam, if I missed something in the learning journey, if I needed better notes, better cheat sheet and things of the sort. I was also a little bit angry at myself. It was a mix of disappointment and anger, and this is totally normal. It's totally normal after a bad performance. So I was disappointed, but I knew that I was actually well prepared. I told myself, you're ready, you studied, you took notes, you understand what you need to do, and you do feel confident. It's just that you got emotional in that specific performance. You let fear win, you let that doubt become bigger than it should have been, and basically the idea is that you can still do it, you just gotta focus on the knowledge, you just gotta act. Don't think, act. Pretty simple. So I bought another attempt. I was like, to actually measure if I'm ready for the exam, I'm gonna try a second time, just to make sure that it's a knowledge problem and not a performance problem. And the second attempt went much smoother, and essentially it was a totally different game. So I ate a quick lunch because I took the first attempt right after having woken up. It was around 11 and a half a.m. So I did the 4 hours. At that point it was around like 2, 3. I eat, and then at 4 I started the new exam, essentially. So I started the second attempt straight away. I didn't even rest, not even 5 minutes. I was tired, but I also had a lot of energy, like a lot of disappointment energy, you could call it. So I knew that energy-wise, I could afford another attempt. If I felt too tired, I would have waited the next day. And this is to say, do not rush these things unless you really do feel prepared. You can even buy multiple attempts at the same time. However, they still cost money. It's still like something that you need to invest. So be mindful over how you do not try just to remove the negative emotion. Also understand if you're actually ready. So the second attempt was completely different than the first. And this is another thing that I experienced, is that this exam can really depend on how much attention you put into that 4-hour window. I felt sharp, I felt focused, I felt like there was nothing in my mind, just the application, burst it open, no doubt, just focus attention. And this time I was not really doubtful if I was gonna finish or not. I was just not thinking about that at all. It was a completely focused experience. Probably because I didn't have the energy to be worried at that point. I just wanted to get it over with, you know? So I was deadly focused on the task. What's the vulnerability? Okay, how do I exploit it? Why this payload doesn't work? Okay, let's try the next. And essentially, I did this in a row. So most of the energy, of course, came as a result of the first failure, which sort of woke me up. And I quickly pick up the vulnerabilities. I quickly discover the right payloads. And essentially, after 55 minutes, I found myself flagging the second application. I was done. I did not even realize how fast that went. The experience was very blurry. I just remembered that I wanted to get done with the exam, and to get done with the exam, you needed to pay a lot of attention to the applications that you needed to exploit. So, thinking about the vulnerabilities, as I said, there is nothing too hard or complex about them. They just require you to focus, to pay attention, and to try different payloads. And to be methodical with your testing. I test for this vulnerability, then for this, then for that, and things of the sort. It can totally be done with good preparation. The real challenge, of course, is not even the window of time, but dealing with the awareness that you only have 4 hours. And if you do not get immediately the vulnerability, this can sort of bring morale down. It can make you more worried. You wanna rush things, but there is no rush here. And I would say that the biggest lesson that I learned from this experience is that preparation is not equal to performance. I knew that even before going into the exam, and with that knowledge, I knew that a poor performance did not mean necessarily that I was not prepared. Sometimes, of course, it's true that if we are not prepared, we will have poor performances, but the inverse, I would say, is not always true. If we have a poor performance, sometimes it does not mean that we are not prepared. So they are different things. We can prepare well, but we can perform poorly. But if we are truly prepared, we can try it again and perform better. And so here comes a lot of awareness, ask yourself, am I well prepared? And learn how to trust the answer you give to yourself. And how do you trust this answer? I think it comes down to the methodology and to the study path that you use to prepare yourself. It's how did I learn about these vulnerabilities? Do I have a conceptual understanding over the vulnerabilities? Do I know the different ways in which I can exploit these vulnerabilities? You do not need to be a master in these things, but you need to have solid conceptual understanding and a practical intuition over how you would exploit it. So basically the idea is that never let a bad performance limit your future growth. If you fail, it's totally normal to fail, just do it again. The most important thing is to do it again. When I failed my first attempt, I still kept trying to discover the vulnerabilities, even though I knew that essentially that attempt was gone. I did not give up until the exam was over. I think I gave up at the 5 minutes mark because I was seriously tired at that point. Now, why did I do that, even if I knew that I had failed at single performance? The idea is that life is not about a single performance. Life is never about a single performance, because life is actually about a very long sequence of performances. And the importance of each one, each one does matter. However, the catch is that it does not matter absolutely on all the others, and there are, of course, performances which matter more than others, but the idea is that each one matters with respect to the entire sequence. So to value the impact of each performance, you have to consider the entire sequence, which is very hard to do, of course. So the idea is that I kept testing, even after it was certain I was gonna fail, because my mind thought, look, any experience I gain here will help me in the future for the next performance. And this is how I suggest you to live performances. They can go bad, as in you have a bad result. However, if you learn anything from them, that's still sort of like a positive growth that you can use later on to actually win them. So that's the idea. In this way, if you approach performances like this, you're always going to be able to get something out of them. So essentially the next performance of course went better. So now what? Okay, you got a certification, but the idea is that, look, it's as easy to overly punish ourselves when we perform poorly, as in, I failed, then I'm a failure, then I'm not good enough, then I was not prepared enough. So we tend to overly punish ourselves, right? Because we don't want us to fail. So the idea is that we punish ourselves. However, it's also easy to overly reward ourselves when we have a good performance. So we say, look, I managed to do it, then I can be more chill in the future with my training and things of the sort. Well, what I like to do is keep feet on the ground. So basically the idea is that, okay, reward and punish ourselves. Yes, this is good to grow, to become better, to become stronger, to become more aware. This is necessary, but never let a good performance limit your growth. So the idea is that both good and bad performances have their role, but we should not allow them to take control over our life. Because sometimes even good performances can be dangerous in the long run if we sort of stop working on ourselves because we had some very good performance. And I really believe in these two phrases. These two phrases, they signify a lot of my philosophy when it comes to learning and to teach. When I teach something, even if I teach it well, I'll always ask myself, how can I improve it? How can I make it even better? So basically that's the idea. Now, ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter if now I have this certification, because after all, they are just symbols. Seriously, they're just symbols. They can be useful. They can allow you to get easier jobs and things of the sort. They can be useful signals. But at the end of the day, I only care so much about symbols. I think the idea is that what's of value? Well, of value to me is my craft, which is the way I think, the way I test, and the way I teach. So, for example, to me, it's also useful to obtain this certification so that I can teach you how to obtain this certification. I can explain what this certification is all about, and I can help other people obtain it. Now, this gives me a new meaning over the certification. But at the end of the day, if I want to keep improving, I have to keep practicing regardless of how many certifications I have. I have to keep discovering new things, keep improving my methodologies and my understanding of the world. And this is exactly like a beginners would have to do. And I truly believe in the beginner's mindset. I probably should make a video on it, on this topic, but the idea is that when you are a beginner, typically you are more humble over things, and this allows you to learn much faster. When you become more accustomed to the knowledge, you take it for granted and it's harder to grow and keep learning new ideas. However, the best combination is to have a beginner's approach with the expertise and the knowledge of a senior, of an expert in some field. And basically that is my experience with the exam. And so that's the idea. I hope it was useful. I hope you get something out of it that goes beyond the certification itself. Because certifications can be good signals, they can be good achievements to test our abilities, to do some upskilling in certain areas. But at the end of the day, what matters is the knowledge itself, What matters is what is beneath the certification. I believe, that's what I believe. Now in the next videos, we will go over more technical topics regarding the BSCP certification. I hope this one was interesting and see you to the next video.